Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Classic Gaming Brothers. I'm Seth.
I'm Zach.
And I'm Ryan.
And we are the Classic Gaming Brothers and Ryan.
And Ryan.
Yay.
He's been here all along.
He has been here all along. To introduce, I guess Ryan can introduce himself to the audience, but we've talked about Ryan before on this podcast, especially if you're a fan of this podcast. He's part of the creature known as the Tri-Ryans.
The Tri-Ryan?
Tri-Ryans. He's also not Ryan Prime, who's British. And the Ryan the Third is mostly gone.
What happened to him?
We don't know.
Okay.
I'm really worried about him.
But however, Ryan on our show today, Ryan is also though closest in relation to Zach and I, and is technically not our brother-in-law, but that weird statement where he's married to my wife's sister, so thus he is a second brother-in-law.
Isn't that just called a guy?
It's just a guy. it's Ryan. So Ryan, you can introduce yourself if you have anything that you want to tell the audience about yourself.
Yeah, I think you covered it. I'm one of the three Ryans of the Ryan Cerebus creature.
Yes, right.
I also go by Rio in certain contexts, especially at shows like our local Rhode Island Comic Con, where I work. I'm by far the youngest of Seth's friends, and a huge fan of classic gaming and this podcast.
That's right. And thus, since he is over the 18, it means I'm only friends with adults.
Seth just wants to make sure that's clear because you said he's the youngest of Seth's friends. So he doesn't want people to think Seth's a weirdo.
Yeah. I just want to
make
a set a baseline at least that I'm only friends with people who are above the drinking age.
Old enough to be married, that's been established.
Depending on where you are. Anyway, so why don't we get into it? And Ryan, why don't you take us away with what you've recently been playing?
All right. Well, most recently, I've been playing a game called Dark and Darker. It's developed by Iron Mace, a small South Korean studio. They market Dark and Darker as a fantasy extraction FPS dungeon crawler. It's a PvPvE adventure. I've had a lot of fun playing Dark and Darker. Players engage each other in combat, but also against monsters. You obtain valuable items, looting through chests, and remaining vigilant against other players. The environment gradually becomes more dangerous over time. There's a damage over time mechanic that eventually kills all the remaining players who haven't escaped to the playable area. So there's always that looming threat of danger from all sides. It's been a lot of fun.
I'm just looking at screenshots of Dark and Darker, and there's a lot of candlelight light in it. I assume the environments are dark and perhaps even darker.
Incredibly, yeah. It is quite dark. A big part of the gameplay is the lighting system, torches, sconces, interacting with the environment around you. Allows you to set up for ambushes from other players or negate them. It's really hard to see without any lighting source, so yeah, it's a huge part.
Is it permadeath, like a roguelike?
It is, yeah. You keep all of your equipment that you escape the dungeon with for that particular run, and you can bring it in to your next ones later on.
So Phasmophobia? Or whatever.
Phasmophobia? The ghost hunting game?
Yeah, the ghost hunting game.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, you go into an instance and you bring the stuff that you've acquired in previous instances, and then if you succeed the instance, you get to keep the things, right? That's Phasmophobia too. I'm sure there's a terminology for games like that. Do you play it as a group or do you play it with randos?
Mostly I've been playing as a group, but you can go into a dungeon solo or as a duo as well. Trios are the limit. There's a bunch of different classes you can select from. It takes a lot of inspiration from the Dungeons and Dragons mythos. The building of your class and your abilities can be pretty specified, so there's a lot of buildcraft involved, setting up your loadout of weapons and abilities, and then playing off of the squad mechanics too.
Nice. That's cool. Seth, do you want to talk about what you've been recently playing?
I've recently been playing Crime Scene Cleaner, which came out August 14th of this year, 2024. I believe there is a mobile version as well. I've not been playing that. I've been playing the one on Steam. Also, there's a game also called Serial Killer Cleanup or something. There's a bunch of violent crime cleanup games, and Crime Scene Cleaner is one of them. It was developed by President Studio and published by Playway SA, who are the house flipper people. They've done a lot of different games where you are in the first person and do kind of monotonous tasks, and this is like those. You play as Mr. Kovalsky, who is a high school janitor who is trying to save up money for his daughter's medical bills when she has cancer, and he is not able to get the money because he is not making enough. It's a very expensive procedure, and so he ends up doing a job for somebody where he has to clean up a crime scene, and it pays him a pile of money. And so then he becomes a crime scene cleaner, and he essentially gets outsourced by the mob to clean up various different crime scenes. And you go into the crime scenes and you clean them up using your mop, your sponge, a pressure washer, and just like using your hands to pick things up. Because you have to like not only like wipe the blood and clean the blood off, but you also need to put furniture back to where it was because there's usually a scuffle. You have to pick bodies up and put the bodies away into the garbage on all sorts of things. One of the things that I've been interacting with is there is also a bucket, and the bucket you have to pick up and you have to fill with water, and then you have to put the dirty stuff into the bucket to then have clean stuff. But eventually you will make the bucket dirty, just like in real life. But then if you don't dump it carefully, you will then make more areas for you to clean up because you will dump dirty, bloody water everywhere. And I did that more than once, and it was annoying because one level I dumped the blood through the wall, and then I couldn't clean it, and I had to restart the level. So now I'm very careful about my bucket, and I don't really move my bucket around because I'm afraid to just run. Because if you just run into the bucket, you'll knock it over, and then all the dirty water will just go everywhere, and it's really annoying. But in a like a fun, really annoying type of thing. So yeah, so that was Crime Scene Cleaner. It's a really addicting game. It was in a pool, just like scrubbing every last bit of blood out of it, and before I decided to put the water back on to make sure everything was clear and the pool was back to normal. And then I turned, and the sauna room is just like a Jackson Pollock of blood. That I'm just like, I gotta get back to it. I just finished this pool, and now I gotta go take care of the sauna. So yeah, that's Crime Scene Cleaner by President Studio. I think it's on sale during the winter sale, which is going on till January 2nd. And Crime Scene Cleaner is on the winter sale, and I think you can get it for like $15, which is not bad. It's a game that I literally started and sunk 4 hours into it. So it's just like,
yeah.
It's great. Zach, what have you been recently been playing?
Recently, I've been playing Celico, or Celico. I don't know how you say it, but it's a game developed by Altered Orbit Studios. Came out in 2024. It's still in early access, actually, as of its release, but it is available to be bought. And it's a first-person shooter where you play as a woman named Dawn, who wakes up in a medical facility that is being raided by a mysterious military organization, and the military is intent on destroying everything on the space station that you are on. The space station is called Sulaco. You explore this large, semi-open world. You have to do a lot of backtracking when you find various key cards and stuff. You fight your way through various enemies. You collect a ton of weapons. There's a ton of breakable environments, hidden areas, power-ups, diary logs, and what's really impressive is it's all done in the Doom engine. Rather the GZ Doom engine, which is a robust source port of Doom. So it's this really gorgeous first-person shooter that is all done in the Doom engine. So it's really impressive to see what they can do with it. But I am really enjoying my time with it so far. It's heavily inspired by games like Half-Life and System Shock, like System Shock 2, and it's got kind of that cyberpunk aesthetic that you would kind of find in a game like System Shock 2.
The gunplay kind of reminded me of OG Halo plus 007, like GoldenEye.
It's also very fast paced. You can do you have a dash move that you can do, so you can quickly dash to the side or dash moving forward. You have melee attacks that you can do. There's a stealth element. It's all stuff that you would never expect to do in Doom, but it is because they're putting so much work into this engine to kind of push it to what it can do. And it's also, like I mentioned, kind of open world, but it does have some good environmental storytelling in a way to kind of guide you so you don't get lost. I picked it up during the winter sale. I think it's currently $13-14.
That's nice. And Ryan's game is free. Dark and Darker is free.
Hey!
Except you can get legendary status for $30, which I don't know what that does.
Yeah, in the free version, you have the ability to just create a single character, whereas with the legendary edition, you get multiple slots to create multiple classes.
Well, today we're going to be talking about a series of games that Ryan is the expert in. We called on Ryan today because a pamphlet fell onto our laps that said, Classic Gaming Brothers talk about Galaga. And we said, oh, we don't know anything about Galaga. And so we were going to throw away this letter. But then Ryan stormed into the office and said, no, I know about Galaga. And so he's going to lead us into a Galaga discussion, as it were, and tell us all about all we need to know about Galaga.
And I'm happy to do it.
With a series, I think, as big as Galaga, I think we probably want to talk about memories and such that we might have. One memory I have is I know Galaga was bundled with Miss Pac-Man in a arcade unit that was kind of everywhere. It was at bowling alleys. It was at movie theaters. It was this like double cabinet. But the thing I remember most is that one version of this cabinet that I encountered at least twice in my life had a glitch that if you jiggled the joystick during the Galaga attract mode, the ship would get stuck for a moment, and then you can take control of the ship and you can play like half of a round before the RAM clears. It would eventually freeze up because of like a checksum error, and then the RAM would flash, and then you would get like a RAM error, and then it would just go back to the beginning of the attract mode. But I've done it on at least 2 machines in my life, so I know it's not a like fluke with one machine.
All the boards are broken.
It could potentially be, but it might just be one revision of that board. But there was a movie theater that I did it at, and I used to do it all the time while waiting for movies because I didn't have any money to play arcade games because I was a poor child. And then it happened again at a bowling alley I went to once, which are the 2 places you would find a Galaga Miss Pac-Man machine, was a bowling alley or a movie theater.
So you were able to play the game for free?
Yeah, for a moment. It only worked on the Galaga segment too. It didn't work on Miss Pac-Man.
So it's like downloading a car.
I could download a car.
Nice.
Yeah, that's just my fun memory of Galaga.
Way to take Ryan's moment before he told us any memories of his memories of playing Galaga.
It was fresh in my mind.
Well, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to rekindle the lost memories of Galaga. Let's hear from Seth next.
My memories of Galaga. So I get confused with Galaga and Caterpillar or Centipede or whatever the other game is. Caterpillar.
Centipede?
I wish there was an arcade game called Caterpillar out there now. And instead of it coming down like a centipede, it came down like the construction caterpillar.
Yeah.
Anyway, I get Galaga and Centipede confused, but I know that Centipede, there is obstacles in your way when you're shooting things and they're coming down. Where Galaga, you're a ship and you're flying left to right and things are coming down, ideally because you're going forward in time. And that's my understanding. I've played Galaga. I am not sure if I've played Galaxian, and I have not played G+. Whatever that...
Gapless?
Gapless. G+.
Yeah.
It's, yes, but I've definitely played Galaga. But in Galaxian, the ship looks like a Star Trek ship, doesn't it?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. I've only played the one where it looks like a regular triangle ship, which is Galaga, which is the older or the newer version, I guess, of Galaxian, because Galaxian's first.
That is correct, yeah. By a couple of years, even.
I always thought the ship in Galaxian looked like an X-Wing.
In Galaxian or Galaga?
In
Galaga, I mean. Galaga. Galaga, yeah.
Yeah. In Galaxian, it 100% looks like the Enterprise.
Yeah. It definitely has like the style of some like non-Enterprise ships.
Oh yeah.
In the background somewhere.
Yeah.
The big bulbous fronts.
Yeah, it's got the bulbous
Exactly.
front and the narcells. Yeah. Well, Ryan, why don't you tell us a bit about your memories then of Galaga?
Certainly. My first memories of Galaga are probably of playing it on the Game Boy Advance. There was a Namco Museum Game Boy Advance game. Had Miss Pac-Man, Pole Position, Galaga, Dig Dug, and Galaxian. So having access to all those games on the go in a handheld console, the backlit screen, definitely made it like a really easy go-to in a lot of situations. A good travel companion. And then from there, I would spot Galaga out in the wild at bowling alleys and movie theaters and even some campgrounds that I went to. So I have a lot of good memories of getting to play the game as intended on the arcade cabinet and even getting the high score in one of the campgrounds. I remember going back later on and seeing that my high score was erased and having to do it all over again to get back on the leaderboard.
It's always a good feeling to see your initials up at the top of a score list. All right. Well, now we can get a bit into Galaga and Galaxian and the history of these games. Like we said, Ryan is the subject matter expert, so we will defer to Ryan's expertise. Ryan, do you want to tell us a little bit about, I guess we can talk about what exactly these games are, because there could be people out there who've never heard of Galaga or Galaxian.
Yeah, for sure. This is the game that when the phrase classic game is uttered, it shows up right up there near the top of the list. But for those who don't know, Galaga is a arcade cabinet fixed shooter from 1981, but it was actually a sequel to Galaxian, which came out 2 years prior in 1979. Galaxian was Namco's answer to Space Invaders, which was gaining a lot of popularity at the time. Namco's desire was to release a competing game using their new technology as a way to break into that market. While these days Galaxian's popularity has been by far overshadowed by Galaga's success, at the time it was really popular and praised for its ability to utilize its hardware so well. Extremely vibrant colors really pulled in an audience. Walking by the cabinet was really the main way you would initially interact with the game, seeing it gameplay live in person in that moment, and then getting you to want to play it. So it really had that going for it at the time, and drove it to a pretty significant success.
And with Galaxian and Galaga, I mean, they got ported to like everything under the sun. I know that Galaxian in particular had an Atari 2600 port, had an Atari 5200 port, had an Astrocade port, and had an Apple II port, which I own the boxed version of. And that version is miserable, but it's just neat that it was available like so prevalently. And I can only imagine that because it was available so prevalently in the late 70s into the 80s, that when Galaga did come out, people were probably like all over Galaga.
Absolutely. And it's an easy game to pick up. For those who haven't played any fixed shooters in this series, the main goal is to destroy all of the enemy ships that are in formation at the top of the screen. The beginning of the stage, they fly in a pattern, arrive at the top of the screen, and then once they're all there, they'll slowly begin to dive bomb you and shoot you with projectiles while you evade their attacks and fire back at them. You complete a stage by destroying all the enemy ships, then you move on to the next one. Every few stages, there's a challenging stage where there's just a pattern of enemy attacks, and then you get a bonus score based on the number you hit during that time period.
I think we've done an episode on fixed shooters where we may have mentioned a couple of different versions of iterations of games.
Yeah, we've talked about Space Invaders a bit before. I mean, it was like the killer app for a while for like arcades. I mean, there's that whole rumor that it caused the yen shortage of that year because so many 1 yen coins were just going into Space Invaders and just sitting there.
Right, which is back at our episode 72 is the one that we talked about fixed shooters. But I do think it's interesting that I think for me at least, and probably for Zach, and definitely for Ryan, though Ryan's an old soul, I think that a lot of those fixed shooters and arcade cabinets that really were Space Invaders and Galaga and Galaxian, more like Galaxian and Space Invaders, and then Galaga, really appealed to a different generation of folks, right? And I think that it's interesting to see someone as young as Ryan being interested in Galaga, which is fun. And did you develop your love of Galaga because you were good at it, or because it was the only option?
I think that something that really draws me into the gameplay, it feels like an endless challenge. There feels like there's no end to the game, and we'll touch upon this later, but there really isn't. It's just an endless perpetual goal forward to get better and better as it gets harder and harder. But that like infinite playing field and that infinite time frame is married really nicely because this is a game set in space. You're flying in space forward towards an enemy, and the graphics and the environment that's conveyed around you all support that together. So it builds this world of endless space and endlessness that I really like. And along with that comes repeatability of the game, and you slowly start to notice things over time about the game that you didn't really see in the beginning. You start noticing parts of the gameplay interacting at different times in different ways. One of the best examples of that is sometimes it feels like you're shooting a lot faster than other times. Like your projectiles are more plentiful. There's no power-ups or anything in the game, but there's these moments where you feel like you're rapid fire, whereas other times you're like spamming the button and nothing's happening. And you'll notice, and you'll find this next time you're probably playing Galaga, the number of projectiles that can be on the screen at any one time is just 2. But what that means is when you connect with an enemy, that projectile's gone and you're able to fire again. So you have these moments, especially on the challenging stages where there's a bunch of enemies, you're getting a bunch of hits, rapid fire, you're able to fire again and again and again and again. And it's because the number of projectiles on the screen is very little, because you're colliding successfully.
It's kind of like in Space Invaders has a similar, it was actually a glitch, but with less enemies on the screen, they go faster, which kind of increases the difficulty. But it was just because the sheer amount of enemies on the screen slowed the CPU down. So you literally had to wipe out the enemies and they would just speed up. But it's just, it's fun that kind of you have those glitches that end up making the game a bit better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, we've alluded to it. There are 3 different games in this trilogy. Galaxian being the first, 1979. Galaga being the second, 1981. And Gapless, 1984. Do you want to break down the differences between these for our listeners?
Oh, absolutely. I think the most recognizable feature of the Galaga series didn't even appear until Galaga itself, is the tractor beam mechanic. Galaxian didn't have one at all. It just had the rest of the gameplay, but Galaga introduced this feature where the boss Galagas, one of the types of enemies that you're playing against, will fly down halfway onto the screen and produce a tractor beam that, if it hits your fighter, captures it and then brings it back into formation. If you then destroy the boss Galaga that has it captured, you get it back, not as just getting your life back, but you get the ship itself joined side by side to your current fighter. Allows you to shoot twice the number of projectiles in that time. And then in the next game, in Gapless, there's that feature again, but this time the players have the ability to use the tractor beam and can capture enemies with it and form a line of fire with several captured ships at once. I think this feature is like the most central and like iconic part of Galaga, and you'll see it. This is where like Galaga representation in other media always touches upon this specific feature. I know in Super Smash Brothers, there's an item which is just the boss Galaga. You throw it and it flies and uses the tractor beam to capture an opponent and brings them to the top of the fighting arena, just like in the games.
Nice. That's cool. That feature was played around with Galaga, and it was so well liked from the enemy side that they were like, well, let's give it to the players in the future.
Yeah, I really think that feature really sets it apart from other games at the time.
Now, why don't you break down a bit I guess, because Galaga you would say is your favorite, right, out of the 3?
Yeah, I would say so.
It's interesting because I think Gapless, despite being like a more advanced, like aesthetically and stuff, I don't think I've ever seen a gapless machine in my life. Like at any arcade things, any like conventions I've been to that have had arcade setups, I've just never seen a gapless machine. But I assume someone likes gapless out there. But we're gonna focus on Galaga because that's your shtick. So why don't you tell us a bit about like this Galaga history and kind of what makes it special to you?
Well, I think the thing that really makes it such an interest is that, like I alluded to before, it's challenging because it just keeps going. And I'm definitely not a good Galaga player. I maybe can make it to double digits of stages before I really have to get sweaty and try to pull it off. And at that point, it's just survival. It's not going for points. The majority of my gameplay is just survival, and then on the challenging stages, catching my breath and doing my best in those moments to hit every enemy that I can, rack up the bonus score, and then go right back to just keeping myself alive. So every time that I've gone for a high score, it's just simply a longevity thing. And the game just keeps going and gets harder and harder. So it just seems like an unobtainable goal. So it's special in the sense that really no other game that I have played or play consistently since learning about Galaga, this is the game that I get that effect from.
Yeah, there's definitely this like urge to do better, I feel like, with Galaga. Like whenever I play, I think it's just the feedback you get from the game itself. Killing the enemies is so satisfying in a way that you just don't quite get it with other fixed shooters, in my opinion. So there's just this urge to kind of keep playing with it.
Yeah, it's got great sound design too. An amazing soundtrack, and the sound effects that the enemy ships make when you destroy them, they're all mimicking bugs, so the sounds that it makes, like squelching noises, really lends itself perfectly to that. It sounds great.
Now, tell us a bit about, I guess, the board itself, the technology behind it, right? Like, this is kind of this is the 80s, so it's simple, but I still think it's kind of neat.
Yeah, for sure. So this is a CPU game. It's got a Zilog Z80 CPU, and an additional one dedicated to just sound. It's a 3.1 megahertz capacity chip. Really cool for its time. It's got so it's Namco's custom 3-channel sound chip, and then for the video resolution is doing 288 by 224 pixels, which is 16 colors. And that really shows. Like, it really has, and I mentioned before, the color scheme here, extremely vibrant. It really stood out amongst those early cabinets just for that reason alone. You can see it in like the planets and stars in the background while you're playing the game.
Yeah. What's neat about the going back to the Z80 CPU, what's neat about the Z80 is it was the Z80 chip it was a very much ahead of its time. It was built as kind of the competitor to the Intel 8080, which was the CPU because it was one of the first. And the Z80 was like how people got into the market, right? Other companies. So they didn't have to source them from Intel. So because it was compatible with a lot of Intel stuff, they were able to source it at a cheaper rate. And the Z80 ended up being in so many old computers. It was in a lot of the Timex computers. It was in the Spectrum. It was in the TRS-80. It was in the Coleco Atom. It was in the Amstrad. It was like the CPU. But I think it's neat that you have this early, as you mentioned, early CPU board, because prior to that it was TTL logic boards and stuff like that, so this is kind of the early stage of what people could really do with these CPUs. And I did also find a fun fact on the technological side by looking up some research into fixing a Galaga board that someone posted, and I think a lot of boards at this time don't have it, but Galaga doesn't have a dedicated place to hook in a video signal, which is kind of interesting. You have to actually route into a Molex connector using like your own proprietary cables and stuff like that. So if you ever find a Galaga board sitting around and you're wondering how to test it, just make sure those Molex connectors are still clean, and you can probably jerry-rig something to get it to run.
When was the last time you seen like a Molex of any kind?
I don't even know what a Molex connector is.
It's like those off-white like plastic connector cables you've probably seen building a computer way back when.
Oh yes, I'm aware of what a Molex connector is. It's what hooks up the hard drives to the computer.
So the release of Galaga was in September 1981 in Japan. It released in North America shortly after, and it was pretty successful. I mean, it's Namco. Like, Namco isn't going to put out a shoddy product, so I think people realized that. And they put out a small version of the arcade cabinet with a 17-inch CRT monitor for buses and airplanes.
Right. So imagine it's 1984. You get on a bus. You really need to go to the bathroom. You get on and you look, and instead of a bathroom, there's a 17-inch CRT version of Galaga that you could play instead of going to the bathroom.
Yeah, this bus doesn't have a toilet, but it sure does have Galaga.
It'd keep you distracted for the remainder of the ride.
And Galaga would, of course, get put onto a whole bunch of systems, with the first being the Sega Galaga, which Sega just likes to put their name on things, for the SG-1000, which that's pretty neat. And then 95, Namco put out a Game Boy version that was bundled with Galaxian. And it's been, in Ryan's notes, he notes here, it's been pretty much on every major console console and mobile platform that has Galaga. Like, you go anywhere, you'll find Galaga. It is impossible to escape it, and it is on more systems than you can possibly imagine.
Yeah, for real. It's a very accessible game. And even on iOS and Android, I believe, currently, there's an app game, Galaga Wars, which includes not just the ships from Galaga, but also Galaxian, Gaplus, and other Namco games as well. That's been a lot of fun to play on the go.
Speaking of on the go, I've seen these for sale at Micro Center and Walmart. They are like dedicated handhelds that just play Galaga and nothing else. And they look like they're like credit card sized PCB with little like controls on them.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's like the perfect travel companion version of Galaga, right? Right there for you anytime.
It's called Micro Arcade. It literally is like credit card size, and it's just a little PCB with a screen. Because Galaga is an arcade game, there's of course some world records. Ryan, before we get into the world records, I want to know, what's your highest score in Galaga? Like, do you know the numeric high score that you have?
My current high score is 68,320.
Wow. That's pretty good. Now, the current world record is 20,980,450, set by Jordan Dorrington back in 2020.
I'm definitely not on the same level as Jordan is. You'll notice that his world record was set in 2020, which is a great time to set world records that require you to stay at your house. It took him 14 hours to complete this marathon run. And to accomplish something like that, Galaga players vying for this kind of record utilize a strategy where certain levels you're able to eliminate most of the enemies but not all of them, leaving just specific ones alive so that you can park your ship, meaning you'll move your ship all the way to one side and the remaining enemies aren't able to reach you if they are dive bomb attacks or projectiles, so that they're on an endless loop, and it lets you take a small break to eat a sandwich, go to the bathroom, and then return to the game. So within that 14-hour span, he did have some time to in between to do things, which is nice. The other thing is he set up his arcade cabinet in his kitchen area, which I think was adjacent to his living room, so that he can still see his wife and somewhat spend some time around other people. He's not like locked in his basement or something, which I think probably made it a little easier for him too.
I saw in your notes that he did have to adjust certain things. Do you know if he was playing on a version that still had the kill screen attack?
I believe in the version that Jordan was running for his marathon run, it is an infinite number of levels. There's not a kill screen that's a part of that particular mode of the game. For those who aren't aware, do we want to talk about what a kill screen is in an arcade cabinet style game?
So I mean, it's a kill screen it's kind of a interesting thing because it's not a kill screen is not an intentional thing. Early arcade boards, as we talked about, were built on either simple logic boards or they were using 8-bit processors. And when they started using 8-bit processors, they had to rely on the limits of an 8-bit processor. One of those is 8-bit integer limits. So literally, just because of the way the chip is built and the way the system is built, it can't exceed 255. So if you get to screen 256, the game will glitch and it becomes unplayable, thus reaching the kill screen. Pac-Man has a notorious one where half the screen basically disappears and it becomes virtually unplayable. With Galaga, I think the screen just gets really glitchy looking, like it becomes like flooded with garbled data, and that's just the common thing, and it's literally just because the system can't exceed that 255 limit. It was a limitation of the time. I don't know if they ever anticipated anyone to go to 256, but I mean, they were hoping people would pump quarters into it, but they probably were hoping you ran out of quarters before you got to the kill screen.
Yeah, exactly. These games are designed for replay value. Having an actual end is counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Right, they just want to take your quarters, all of the quarters, until the quarters can be taken no more.
Yeah, we don't really have kill screens anymore because technology has far surpassed the limitations of 8-bit architecture.
Now we just have DLCs.
Yeah, which will also take your quarters.
We can get into the numbers if Seth is itchy to talk about that.
As I always enjoy learning how things sold. So Galaxian, going back to the first one, being released in 1979, was a critical and commercial success upon its release. In Japan, it was the second highest earning arcade game of 1979, right below Space Invader. Then Namco did do its best, but it couldn't unseat the king until the following year, where during the following year it actually outperformed Pac-Man for a while and ended the year with Galaxian being the second highest earning arcade game of 1980, but below Pac-Man instead of Space Invader. Galaxian was maintained pretty high grossing arcade cabinets throughout Japan, going to go on to tie with Defender and Turbo in later years. And pretty much up until 1983, the game, according to the publication Game Machine, was performing pretty well. In the United States, Galaxian was also the second highest grossing arcade game of 1980, but this time it was right below Asteroids, because in America we liked our ships and we liked blowing things up, and we liked Asteroids more than we liked Galaxian. And according to both the publication Playmeter and Cashbox, Galaxian had sold 40,000 arcade units in the United States by 1981 and 50,000 units in the US as of 1982, which is a quite significant number of arcade. If you're thinking, that's like 50,000 locations that have at least one like it has to be like a Galaxian cabinet, which is pretty intense if you think about 50,000 different retail locations. So Galaxian was a successful product, which spurred them on to make Galaga and G+. For Galaga in Japan, it was the sixth highest grossing arcade game of 81, and then the third highest grossing arcade game of 82, and then the ninth highest grossing table arcade cabinet of 1986. In North America, it regularly appeared on monthly sales charts of Replay magazines from April 1980 to April 1987, being only outdone by Sega's Monaco Grand Prix in 1979, which I believe is an arcade cabinet that has some sort of attachments to it, either a wheel or some other various things to climb on. Galaga was among the top highest grossing arcade games of 1983 in the United States. Now, the information gets less and less knowledgeable as we go along the game cabinets, and so all we know with G+ is or however it's pronounced, in Japan, the publication Game Machine had it that G+ on their May 15th, 1984 issue as being the most successful table arcade unit for the month. So at least there was 1 month that G+ did well, and which implies that if it had a month where it outsold all other table arcade units, then it must have been successful at the end of the day, right? So all three games would be successful both critically and commercially for sure.
I mean, I'm not saying Gapless was a bad game.
I just think there's not a lot of information with it. Well, it's also because it's a later dated kind of game, and it was also competing against Galaxian and Galaga. If Galaxian was performing well up until 1983, and G+ was getting released in 1984, and you had Galaxian from 1979, why are you buying G+ if you could buy, if anything, a cheaper Galaga, right? Because by 1984, it's already 3 years of Galaga's lifespan. If you're still cranking on Galaxian from 1979, now your machine is getting up there in age. It's like 6 years old now, right? Now you're like, oh, I got to get a new one. I could just get one of these new Galaga machines that are like been out in the market for a while, so they're at a discount.
And this is a short time period too. We're only talking about a 5-year gap between Galaxian and Gapless. And on top of that, we have not just games in a physical form like a disc, but full arcade cabinets that have to be like delivered or at least installed, converted from an existing cabinet or something.
I'm just watching gameplay right now of someone playing Gapless, and the whole thing that you can do with the tractor beam just makes the game look so broken, because you can capture the enemies and line them up next to you, and then they fire at the same time as you, so the whole screen is just them firing. Like wipe.
You make like an army of tractor beamed enemies in Gapless, which is why I'm guessing that's where the plus comes from, because it's Galaga plus these enemies that I've collected throughout this time.
I think that will do it for our Galaga conversation.
Our Galaga conversation.
This Galaga talk that we've had.
A Galaga TED Talk.
Yeah, Ryan, thank you for sitting us down and filling us in with the information about Galaga that we never knew we needed.
Maybe we didn't even need it.
Well, you won't know until you know.
That's right.
Not until one day you're invited to a bowling party and aren't interested in bowling that day, so you can play Galaga instead.
I think people who say they're into bowling are pretending.
Well, you got to watch out because there may be some bowlers that listen to the show.
What are they going to do? Fight me with their shoes they can't wear outside of the alley?
Guarantee you that a bowler could take you on.
And next time on Classic Gaming Brothers, bowling.
We'll bring back elf bowling.
We should do a bowling game episode.
Yeah, we could talk about bowling games.
That'll satisfy the bowlers. We'll win them back.
Well, getting into our Retro Rewind segment, because Ryan's our guest, we didn't subject him to playing any of the terrible games Seth and I have been subjecting ourselves to.
That is an idea, though. Maybe we should subject our guests to playing terrible games as entry to our podcast.
But, Ryan, do you want to talk about a retro game you've been recently playing?
Sure. Lately, I've been playing a lot of Minecraft as well. It's a great way for me to get some creative juices flowing. I basically just play the creative mode. Don't really do any survival stuff or actual crafting. I just build things like virtual Legos. But I play Bedrock Edition, so I can use my controller. It's also a good platform for me to adjust my controller profile and sensitivity and stuff. So I use it kind of as like a testing ground for new controller settings and stuff too. It's been a lot of fun lately and a great time sink for those quiet moments in the night where I'm not really sure what I want to do and don't really want to think too hard.
Seth, what about you? What have you been retro rewinding?
I've actually been playing some, this is going to be a little bit of a cop-out, I think, but I've been playing a little bit of Red Dead Redemption, which is a 2010 action-adventure game that was developed by Rockstar San Diego and published by Rockstar Games. I have been arguably been playing the port to the PC because I've been playing it on my Steam Deck, but they didn't do much to it. So I would say that really they just delivered me a 2010 game that I paid premium price for, which is it's not great, but it's okay. It's a successor to Red Dead Redemption, if you don't know about it, is a successor to the 2004 Red Dead Revolver game for the PlayStation 2. It's the second game in the Red Dead series, Red Dead Redemption being the second, and Red Dead 2, or Red Dead Redemption 2, being the third, but also a prequel. The Red Dead world is just a wonky world of Arthurs and Johns. Red Dead Redemption is set during the decline of the American frontier in the year 1911. This is told to you on a train ride where people talk about airplanes flying and the priest saying that's not going to ever happen, and the old lady behind you saying things about how people who aren't like them should be killed. It follows John Marston, who's a former outlaw. His wife and son are taken hostage by the government, and he has to get hired out as a hired gun. He also then goes to try and bring 3 members of his former gang to justice, and I'm going to tell you, right in the beginning of the game, he gets shot. And he gets shot by those former member of his gangs, and then he gets nursed back to life by a woman by the name of Bonnie, and then he starts ranching. It's a Western game that, if you like Red Dead Redemption 2, you may like Red Dead Redemption. I don't know if you'll like Red Dead Revolver, but it's a Western game where he plays John Marston. Though people don't say "Hey Arthur," which is arguably probably the best part of playing Red Dead Redemption 2.
If they said "Hey Arthur," it'd be really weird because your guy's name is John. He does wear Arthur's hat though.
So does Arthur.
That's true. Well, a retro game that I've been rewinding has actually been Half-Life 2, but I've been playing it through Synergy. Synergy was a mod made by Synergy Team back in 2005. It's an old mod, and it allows you to play it co-op. And that's basically all it does. It doesn't really do too much else. There's no fancy bells or whistles. It adds a couple of slight changes to certain triggers and stuff like that to make co-op function properly in Half-Life 2, because Half-Life 2 was not made to be a game that you played with other people, but this does allow you to do that. It is a bit chaotic because Half-Life 2 was not designed to be played with other people. It causes the game to go by fast, way faster than you'd anticipate, because you're just mowing down Metro cops with your multiple people, because you can have servers of up to I think you can have servers of up to 20 people. It was just me and one person playing, but we had a couple other people randomly join us. So at one point it was 5 of us just going through Half-Life 2, just mowing down Metro cops and headcrab zombies. But the one thing I will say is it is very dated. Synergy was released back in 2005. It has not been updated much since 2005. So if you want to play it online and you don't want to play with other people, good luck, because you have to get a server to run, and it involves a lot of port forwarding and trying to finagle random server settings that are long since archaic and not really easily able to set up. If you remember setting up a server back in the early 2000s, good luck. But if you still have something like Hamachi, I'm sure you can get it running fine. But with Synergy, when my friend and I were playing it, we ended up going into an abandoned server, which was plentiful because no one plays Synergy anymore. I think there was a player count of about 10 while we were playing. And we got onto a server with 0 people. And at one point, one person joined us and then they left because we weren't talking to them. So it was a fun time.
That's how I play all my multiplayer games. I refuse to talk to randoms.
We got to the canals of Half-Life 2 before we ended up just giving up because it was getting late. But yeah, it was fun. I mean, it's Half-Life 2. Not much really else to say besides playing it with multiple people makes for an interesting occasion. Oh, there was one funny thing that did happen. So, and the game definitely planned for this. So when you get to Kleiner's lab in Half-Life 2, there's a mini teleporter, and you can put things on the teleporter and press a button, and it will like zap the object over to another part of the room. And it was just like Valve showing off the Source engine, right? It was just them being like, look at the things we can do with Source. We can make teleporters. One thing that Synergy people knew you were going to do is stand on the teleporter and get your friend to activate it. And if you do that, it will teleport you to a random part of the map where you are abandoned on a beach with a single chair and a can of beer and nothing else. And you can't escape. So I had to like drown myself to get back to where I needed to be. But it was just a very fun little Easter egg that they included. That I was happy to find. But yeah, that's Synergy. Fun little vintage mod, I guess you could say, if you are a Half-Life 2 fan. Well, that will do it for our episode altogether, though. Ryan, thank you very much for coming on and telling us all about Galaga and the multiple versions of Galaga and the different ways to play Galaga. Before we close things off, do you want to plug anything?
I don't. The only thing that I would plug in a time like this is the Classic Gaming Brothers podcast. But the listeners are already listening, so mission accomplished.
All right. Well, Seth, do you want to take us out?
Sure. If you want to listen to more of the Classic Gaming Brothers, mostly without Ryan, you can listen to us at classicgamingbrothers.com, or you can also listen to us wherever you listen to your podcasts. We're also on YouTube, which is Classic Gaming Brothers, so you can give us a follow or subscription or whatever you do over there. If you want to learn more about when our episodes come out, it happens on Sunday, but you could also follow us on social media. We promise we won't blow up your feed or actually post much. That's Facebook, Instagram, and Twitch. Our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitch are at Classic Gaming Brothers, and our Twitter and Blue Sky account are CG Brothers Pod, because we are, if not anything, consistent. And I think that's pretty much it. If you want, you can tell 3 friends and have them tell 3 friends, and then everyone will be happy. Yeah, give us a rating. 5 stars will do. And then, Zach, am I missing anything?
Don't play games like my brother.
And don't play games like my brother.
Don't play games like my brother-in-law.
Oh. I've been Zach.
I've been Seth.
And I've been Ryan.
And we've been the Classic Gaming Brothers.
And Ryan.
And Ryan.
That's right.